Hello, and welcome to our second episode of ATXM News. I'm Jessica Forsythe.
And I'm Ray Price.
We're both musicians working for musicians through Austin, Texas Musicians nonprofit, serving the Central Texas music community on city, state, and federal policy, and providing basic needs and services that will improve our quality of life.
So much of our advocacy work involves education by keeping our music community up to date with the latest information that affects them. Sometimes there's just too much to share with a simple social post or newsletter, and that's why we got together to create this 30-minute news program tailored just to Central Texas musicians.
That's right. Each show will dig deep into policy projects, community news, musician education, and a little bit of inspiration too, as we highlight the people and partners who help make a difference in our lives.
As we say here at Austin, Texas Musicians, we want you to show up, speak up, and be heard. And we hope ATXM News will serve to help you make your own informed decisions about the issues that you care about.
First up tonight, part 2 of our story on the Live Music Fund. The long-awaited program has finally launched, and we'll check in with city staff to see how we got here and learn what Central Texas musicians think about it.
It's an exciting time for Central Texas musicians with the much anticipated launch of the Live Music Fund. We checked in with a few local music industry leaders to learn more about this historic opportunity.
A historic public fund for music, a groundbreaking effort to bring equitable opportunity to underserved musicians, a frustratingly slow and confusing process. The Live Music Fund has been called all of these things since its inception in 2019. After 4 years of input from working groups, Music Commission, and Economic Development Department staff, applications opened for the LMF in March of this year, and with it, a unique opportunity for musicians to make a substantial investment in their careers. We learned a little bit about how we got here in our last episode. Today, we'll show you just how the first rounds of applications work and what musicians think about it.
The Live Music Fund came about in 2019 after lots of years of advocacy from the music community because the cultural funding programs for arts had been around for decades. And so the Music Commission and the community got together and just did a lot of advocacy work with the mayor and council to carve out a portion of the hot tax, which is hotel occupancy tax, that goes to cultural funding, carve out a specific budget just for music. So the eligibility categories for this first pilot program is professional musicians that have had 2 years experience. Not in the last 2 years, it could be any 2 years because there could be musicians that have retired or just haven't been playing recently, and that's okay if you have that professional experience. Also, independent promoters of 3 or less, including the promoter. So these are small independent promoters that work, for many, many venues and events. The promoters can't be tied to one specific venue. We are working with the Long Center as our third-party administrator, and that was also a big recommendation of community. So once the application closes on May 16th, the Long Center will start their work of doing all of the evaluations and having those evaluations kind of confirmed. And so we just need to see how long that's going to take. It depends on how many people apply. And also it's just a new process with a new partner. And we've never done this program before. So our goal is to get it done as quickly as possible and get agreements, by early summer so that we can get that money flowing for deposits.
Understandably, anticipation has been building in the music community surrounding the launch of the program. We've gathered a wide range of feedback from musicians, and the results show some very mixed opinions, with a ratio of 10 regarding the application process negatively against 1 in favor of the current format. I feel like this Live Music Fund doesn't really apply to me, and I'm someone who does live music for a living. It feels like it's more for promoters. We are in the only city on the continent putting on a live music fund like this. Apply. If you have issues, attend their office hours posted on the site. There's some good humans trying to help. Many of us do put events together with these kinds of documents or budgets, which could be used as proofs or plans, but they take time to create, and it can be a full-time job. To do that with this window of time for the application after just finding out the parameters while taking care of our families and actually doing our jobs is unrealistic for most. Seems way too complicated and really not geared to help the average musician trying to build their career and make a living playing live music in this community. Many musicians are going to miss out on these funds. When will it ever really be about helping musicians? I don't believe that the Live Music Fund Group Committee meant for the process of applying for this grant to be so complicated. It's important to note that while the current application may have its challenges, the Live Music Fund is an evolving process. In year 2, venues will be eligible to apply for funds, and city leaders and staff are committed to hearing feedback and making adjustments as needed. Austin, Texas musicians will continue to gather this valuable input from our community and share with music commissioners in hopes that the LMF will truly serve the hardworking musicians of Central Texas.
Thanks, Jessica. Coming up next, learn about the Fair Pay at South by Southwest campaign and efforts to legislate a fair wage for South by musicians. Next on ATXM News.
Come out to Night Shift, a monthly music industry mixer hosted by Austin, Texas musicians. On the second Monday of every month from 7 to 11 p.m., grab a drink and talk to fellow musicians, city staff, nonprofit partners, and industry pros at My Oh My on Brushy Street. With a curated playlist of local music and rotating presentations from community organizations. Don't miss out on this great night to make these crucial connections. Night Shift, every second Monday, 7 to 11 p.m. at My Oh My.
South by Southwest is a world-renowned festival that is meant to celebrate our city's music, film, and technology, drawing in thousands and millions of dollars to Austin for 1 week each year. However, in the eyes of many musicians, South by Southwest is not living up to its grand reputation when it comes to paying us for our hard work and talent.
For the past 12 years, South by Southwest has paid musicians a meager sum of $100 for solo acts and $250 for bands, or simply provided performers with festival wristbands as compensation. After enduring over a decade of this unfair treatment, the Fair Pay South by Southwest campaign has gained momentum during last month's festival, and efforts to solidify its demands into South by Southwest policy continue on even after the festival has ended. On March 27th, the Austin Parks and Recreation Board brought forth a proposal for City Council that seeks to withhold city contracts from South by Southwest.
I think it's very important that the City of Austin make its values clear through who it chooses to contract with, and I think we should hold our contractors to a high standard, to the standards that, we as a city want to uphold, which we do in many other areas. So I think it's only fair from this perspective that we do the same with South by Southwest.
Ultimately, a decision on the resolution was postponed until the June 26th meeting.
As someone who is a member of the union that represents the workforce that I'm a part of, issues dealing with fair pay and dignity at your workplace are issues that I gravitate to. So I felt that this was something that we could look into because the city of Austin and South by Southwest have such a collaborative and close working relationship.
I think, the city has a lot of precedence when it comes to living wage and holding certain groups accountable to living wages. It's something they've done with their contractors in construction for a long time. So, to me, the goal would be that we set sort of a best practice for this type of arrangement with South by or other private companies utilizing city parks.
Musicians have been complaining about South by Southwest for years. You can go on Twitter and, search back 10, 15 years. You can find musicians complaining about the pay and treatment from the festival from a while ago. It seemed like kind of every year someone would go viral talking about the economics of the festival or how terrible their experience was, etc. So it's something people have been complaining about for a long time. So once UMass started, we've actually talked about going back to South by Southwest and thinking about, the pay this time that they offer musicians, which I'm sure has been set at $250 if you're a band, $100 if you're a solo artist, or a wristband to the festival for over a decade now. While it's all they pay out to musicians, they've actually increased the application fee to play the festival. It's one of the only major festivals in the country that does this. And I think artists have just been absolutely fed up with this.
Musicians say they deserve to be compensated for their work just like any other profession, and many feel that it is unacceptable for a large corporation like South by Southwest to offer minimal or no payment for our hard work. Make sure to mark your calendars for June 26th. We will continue reporting on this story to keep you informed on new developments and how to best have your voice heard each step of the way.
Thanks, Lee. When we come back, we'll learn about an onslaught of anti-drag performance legislation brewing at the Texas Capitol, next on ATXM News.
The current legislative session in Texas has seen a drastic surge of proposed bills that aggressively target drag shows. A total of 15 bills so far have been introduced in the House and Senate, all with a singular purpose: to criminalize performers and threaten local venues. These bills use vague language to define drag as any form of self-expression that deviates from an individual's assigned gender at birth, encompassing not only drag performers, but also musicians who use their art as a form of self-expression and empowerment. Out of these 15 bills, only two, SB 12 and SB 1601, have made it to the floor for a vote yet. On March 23rd, nearly 500 people registered to testify against these bills in front of the Committee on State Affairs. Among them was Brigitte Bandit, a local Austin drag queen who has been at the forefront of the community's fight against these discriminatory bills and whose 2-minute testimony made waves across the internet. I got to sit down with Brigitte and talk to her about the effects of these bills on her community.
And the narrative is that drag is like inherently sexual, and it's not inherently sexual. You know, it really is just playing with makeup and gender expression or beyond that, you know? So I think that's their misconception. They just don't know what drag is. With the way that they define drag, right, it would affect any kind of trans person. It would affect trans people a lot. And I feel like that's what these bills are rooted in, is transphobia. So we have to acknowledge that it is an attack on trans people too. It would affect somebody like, you know, we have Pink Star, our local trans pop star, doing a show somewhere. You know, she's performed at the Capitol before. And it would affect people like her as well.
One of the organizations spearheading the fight against these bills has been Equality Texas, a nonprofit that strives to protect LGBTQ+ Texans from discriminatory legislation and help them have their voices heard at the state level. Brad Pritchett, field director, spends days at the Capitol every legislative session, organizing and coaching those who want to testify.
We've got a chunk of bills that either go after drag as a whole, or it goes after businesses that allow drag to happen there, or it goes after drag performers and artists, or it goes after like the different venues that they may be having drag performances or drag of any kind, in as far as like drag queen story times or brunches and things like that. So some of the bills are different. Some of the bills implement what we call a drag tax. So basically, if you're a business that does like drag brunch on Sundays, you would have to register as a sexually oriented business, which is a ridiculous thing to tell a restaurant that they have to do when all they're doing is a drag show on Sunday, right? And what that does is it imposes additional taxes on that business, number one, so it costs them more money to operate, but then it also has them labeled as this thing that they're not, right? A sexually oriented business. And it is this attempt to paint, and they do it with a lot of bills, but this is an attempt to paint all drag artists as something explicit when we know that's not the case. I think some of the arguments we've heard have been things like, if you pass a bill that bans drag performances, and the definition of drag might be something like anybody who's wearing clothing opposite of the gender that is on their birth certificate or something like that, which is just weird anyway. Like there was a time when in places like Houston, you could be criminalized if you were a woman for wearing pants, right? That was literally the law. Until like the 70s. So, I mean, how do you define like what clothing is appropriate for men's clothing versus women's clothing? Number one, it's just really broad and weird and open to interpretation. One of the examples that's come up over and over again is like, if we're talking about a really basic definition, a man dressed as a woman performing, does that mean you can't show movies like Mrs. Doubtfire anymore? Right. If a theater shows Mrs. Doubtfire, do they have to register as a sexually oriented business? These bills will have more opportunities for folks to engage on. And I would just encourage folks to key in and pay attention when we're sending stuff out, because we send a lot of stuff out during Ledge, and I'm sorry, but I'm not at the same time, because it's important. But for the bills that actually would impact performers and artists, like those voices are going to be really important in committee hearings, because people need to hear from folks as to how these things would negatively impact somebody's art, because art is First Amendment protected.
Performers, whether they're musicians or drag artists, use their performances as a means of free speech and self-expression, and these bills could hinder their ability to freely do so. Follow us and Equality Texas for updates and calls to action when these bills are up to face public testimony.
Thanks, Sarah. Next up, a report on the state of gigging downtown from ATXM Program Manager Scott Strickland. Stay tuned for more ATXM news.
There's been a lot going on in terms of downtown development for the live music industry, from safety to street usage. Let's take a deeper dive.
ACT is the ACT plan. It's our Austin Core Transportation Plan. And basically, it's a study of our transportation and mobility options in the downtown area. We define downtown as, the boundaries are to the north, MLK, to the south, the river, to the west is Lamar, and the east is 35. And really what the ACT plan will be is a way to communicate the ultimate plans for the right-of-way for our downtown streets. And it will also be an implementation plan. So along with, the plans for each street, we'll have a way to implement with strategies. So it'll be an actionable plan, hopefully not one that, sits on the shelf, but one that we'll have something to do with, and the public will know, what to expect in the future. And we started with phase one in August of last year. So phase one launched with a survey to the public. And we asked folks, basically it was like an opportunity just to kind of get people aware that this was happening, and talk to folks about their preferences for modes downtown. We asked how they get around, how they would like to get around in the future. And that first phase, the first 2 months there were about just getting folks familiar with our plan. And then from that survey, there's a really exciting results from that. We had over 2,100 responses, and ATX Musicians Org was really helpful in getting a lot of perspectives from musicians in that. So then we took that information and kind of built our second phase of the project, which began in January of this year and ran through March of this year, 2023. And we kind of got more technical in that second phase. We took what we heard in phase one from people and said, okay, we hear that these are your priorities. Now let's get into the trade-offs that we're going to have to make. We identified a lot of different focus populations that we wanted to engage with through this process, and musicians have been consistently, because of our partnership with y'all, one of our top responding focus populations. So that's been really exciting and exciting to dig into that data that we can break down by our focus groups. But ultimately, it's really important for us to understand all of the diverse perspectives of the user groups for downtown. I can relate to someone who's moving from the 9 to 5 commute, because that's what I do. But, as someone writing the plan, I want to understand all perspectives. So we're thinking about it through our engagement. Okay, who do we not know about with their needs and concerns of the downtown in terms of mobility? How do we, I like to say that we don't know what we don't know. Right. And so while I relate to our 9 to 5 commuters, I don't know what musicians might need for their mobility downtown, or anyone who's working maybe later shifts, bartenders, restaurant owners, hotel staff workers who work overnight. Downtown runs 24/7. So what are the people after those hours with different uses for the downtown? What do they need? And how can we incorporate that into our plan so that it's not just effective for the typical folks who we hear from all the time in our city engagement, but how are we going to make this plan work for everyone? And musicians in particular, they contribute so much to our downtown. They are a piece of that culture and lifeblood of Austin and what makes Austin so special. So how can this plan really help musicians out and make our downtown a space where people want to travel to hear that live music as well?
Another major problem musicians face when working downtown is, of course, safety. Last year, Austin, Texas musicians set up a partnership with Downtown Austin Alliance and Block by Block to form the Gig Buddy program, a free service for musicians that provides safe escort, cartage, and setup for gigs downtown. Nick Haynes is the operation manager for Block by Block and was key in the formation of the program.
Block by Block is simply the service provider for the Downtown Austin Alliance ambassadors. We actually have programs all over the country, but obviously, this is relevant to DAA's program. So next slide, please. You see a picture of our team, you'll see us walking downtown in what's called the Public Improvement District, which is most of the downtown on the west side of the frontage road. And we actually have almost 60 ambassadors that do just a number of roles, but safety is at the heart of what we do. We actually have safety guides, and even the cleaning that we do is to give the perception of safety or to protect that perception. So really it's at the core of what we do. And when Gig Buddy reached out, it's just natural for us to do this and just to help out and provide a hand within our district.
To schedule a Gig Buddy, go to austintexasmusicians.org or email Sonia at austintexasmusicians.org a week in advance. With these exciting developments, the next big question musicians have is one that's been a topic of discussion for decades. What about parking? Stay tuned in our coming ATXM News episodes for more on this hot-button issue.
Thanks, Scott. Sounds like we have a lot of exciting things in play for musicians downtown. Next up in our community spotlight, I sat down with Musicians Advisory Panel member Adolph Ortiz to talk to him about his career as a longtime gigging musician in Austin and the state of the Latin music community in Central Texas. Man, always a fan, but pleasure to finally connect with you in person. Adolph, it's a pleasure.
Pleasure to be here with you.
Hey, thank you so much. We're going to jump right in. We're going to learn a little bit about you today. That's cool? All right.
That's cool.
All right, so first and foremost, obviously, Mariachi royalty here, but for the fans that don't know, let's just kick it off right off the bat. What part of what role do you play here in the Austin music scene?
I've been playing since the 80s here in Mariachi when I was a kid in my high school days. And I went through the high school program here. It was the only program in Central Texas, really in Texas at some point. One of the first ones around at Travis High School. So I started out in the program that was legendary to begin with. And then I played with Mariachi Estrella, which was Austin's first mariachi here in town. And then, of course, I broke off and formed my own group in 1991. And so ever since then, just been going at it for all those years and just building my reputation. It seems like every musician that does mariachi at some point does a little time in my group. I'm kind of like see that whether they come and stay or not is dependent on whether I wanted them to stay or they realize, man, it's hard playing with Adolph.
Yeah.
So, because I'm very demanding. So, but having that standard has developed a higher standard in Austin. Because of that, that kind of builds up what everyone strives to be in Austin. A lot of people want to be Mariachi Relampago. They do want to be us. They want to be what we've done or, emulate it in some fashion. They'll have their own name, they'll have their own group. They want to be similar to what we've done.
Yeah. So like the pioneer, like the leads, man, the upper echelon of the mariachi scene.
Yeah, a lot of people will say that I kind of brought that scene to Austin.
That's an honor, man.
There's a lot of other people that brought the scene, but I brought a different level.
Yeah, absolutely. Scene. How do you help young mariachi musicians coming out of UT or other programs?
We like to hire out with the UT or from Texas State. Some of us are members of Texas State, or alumni, I should say, Southwest Texas back when I went. So, we like to look for them because some of those kids, they go through school, they went through high school playing mariachi, then they go to college, they play mariachi, and then they're out, and they're like, what do I do now?
Sure.
Well, we're like, hey, come play with us professionally, let's see what you got, And it draws on them. We look at their skills. They've been played by putting music in front of them all their lives. We try to make them learn to use their ear along with everything and develop other areas. So their professionalism starts gaining more after they get out of school by just hanging with us and learning with us. Some of them, like I said, they eventually leave. Some of them stick around. Right now we got several guys from Texas State that play with us.
What do you do besides music?
Right now I'm a school administrator. I was a teacher for years. I did music, taught music, and then I went into music, the special education, and elementary education, and now I'm an administrator for a school district. It's a small charter school district, and I do the school improvement planning, and I teach the teachers basically.
So what's the demographic of the students you work with? Are you teaching a specific style of music? Are you prepping more for mariachi players? Or are you doing like classical guitar or rock guitar?
I don't do the school kids music anymore because since I'm the administrator now. But before, what I did was guitar.
Okay.
Yeah, when I was teaching music in schools, it was just guitar. But now that I'm an administrator, I'm actually teaching teachers, and so I don't get to work with the kids as much. Yeah. But yeah, I did guitar, and I had it over here. It was East Austin Music Academy. We were part of Texas Preparatory after-school program and the weekend program. And it was guitar, classical guitar, drums. I teach drums too.
Yeah.
I'm not the greatest drummer in the world, but
Y'all
that
need
was,
to be sometimes.
Yeah. Because our demographics, you speak demographic. We have both Hispanic and African American students in our schools. So African American students didn't want to play the drums.
Sure.
And Hispanic kids want to play the guitar.
Yeah.
So and then they all cross over too. So those are the two things I taught.
What else would you like to tell Austin musicians and fans, supporters alike?
I just like to say like this: let's keep it up. Let's keep it up. Let's keep expanding. When it comes to Austin, it's a mixed city. It's a very mixed city. It's a beautiful city. It's an expensive city. But like I said before, people talk about Nashville, Los Angeles, all these other places that have music. I think the best musicians are here in Austin. Let's keep that going. Let's not just be the live music capital. Let's be the music capital, period. End of story, because there is so much music here. We were talking about Mueller. This was an airport. Now it's a mecca of studios and restaurants and everything. And I'm sure if we come here on the weekend, there's musicians sitting on the edge of the tables playing, just like mariachis when you go to restaurants. Any of these little coffee houses. Let's keep the music going, whether it's small, big, large, but just Austin, just to keep going with music and show the world that we are the capital of music, not the live music, the capital of music.
Boom. Love that. Thank you so much, Adolph. Pleasure, man.
It was a pleasure.
Thanks, Ray. And with that, our second episode of ATXM News comes to a close. We hope that you've enjoyed the show, and we hope you've learned a little bit more about what makes our Austin music community so great. We're unique in the sense that we have more support here for musicians than most anywhere else in the U.S. But we also face some unique challenges that make it difficult to live and work here as musicians.
Austin, Texas Musicians is committed to serving our music community through advocacy, education, and a little bit of inspiration along the way, so that musicians have a better quality of life within the live music capital of the world. We hope you'll join us on this journey. See you next time.
Come out to Night Shift, a monthly music industry mixer hosted by Austin, Texas musicians. On the second Monday of every month from 7 to 11 p.m., grab a drink and talk to fellow musicians, city staff, nonprofit partners, and industry pros at My Oh My on Brushy Street. With a curated playlist of local music and rotating presentations from community organizations, don't miss out on this great night to make these crucial connections. Night Shift, every second Monday, 7 to 11 p.m. at My Oh My.